Less than 30 hours to go before MLB's trade deadline, and we have a Blue Jays transaction. So let's talk about it. This is instant analysis on sportsnet.ca. Arden Zwelling, he's Ben Nicholson-Smith, and Ben, left-handed reliever Brad Hand will join the Blue Jays bullpen, acquired from the Washington Nationals in exchange for catcher Riley Adams. And Hand's a useful guy. He's been pretty steady over the last 5, 6, 7 seasons, closing games for a couple of teams. Not an overpowering guy. Not going to light up the radar gun, but he does get a good amount of swing and miss with his fastball and a slider that he locates especially well, and that hitters have just never had much success at barreling up over the course of his career. As I mentioned, plenty of experience in high leverage spots. He's been Washington's closer all season. Peripherals maybe not spectacular this year. Strikeouts down a bit, walks up a little bit, maybe something to keep an eye on. But Ben, I mean, even if this isn't the prime version of Brad Hand, I think this is still clearly someone who's going to address a need in the Blue Jays bullpen.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for months. That need for bullpen help hasn't gone away, even though they've added Richards, of course, and Simber, and those guys have helped. But Brad Hand can help more, and that's a good thing. There's room for a lot of good relievers in this bullpen. Too often this year, the Blue Jays haven't had enough of those guys, and Hand can definitely help. As you say, closing out games for the Washington Nationals this year. He's been a closer actually every year since 2016. So kind of creates an interesting question for the Blue Jays as far as how they use him. Is he going to be that traditional closer? Do they combine that with Jordan Romano? We'll see exactly what happens, but he can help this team. I think it's also interesting, as you mentioned, looking at the peripherals. And this is a guy whose velo was actually up this year, but the K percentage is down, the walk percentage is up. So he's not having quite that vintage Brad Hand season, but even still, he can be a good reliever who can help this team.
Yeah, you're right that we have been talking about him for a while because he's been linked to the Blue Jays a bunch of times in the past. And it's actually kind of interesting to look back to this past winter, this past offseason. Brad Hand was actually on waivers. Like Cleveland put him on waivers in like a pretty, obvious cost-cutting move because he had a really strong 2020. And at that time, any team in baseball could have picked him up, and it was a $10 million club option that they would have been taking on. And somewhat incredibly, Brad Hand just passed through waivers at that time. Cleveland denied the option. He became a free agent, signs with the Nationals for $10.5 million. So like good for Brad Hand. He earned more money than he would have, but it's sort of funny, Ben, to like look back at that moment in time now when a team like the Blue Jays could have acquired him without giving up a Riley Adams, without giving up anything. And now the Blue Jays are having to actually trade for him and assume the rest of his 2021 salary.
Right. That's the nature of these deadline deals, right? If you have good pitching and you're a team that's, headed toward the bottom of the standings, then you actually do have some leverage. There are no free agents out there. You're the only show in town. So teams like the Nationals are able to sell and really get something good back. And it's interesting because, you mentioned Adams, and that's really a guy we saw in the major leagues this year, but someone who is at a position of depth for the Blue Jays. They have so much catching in the big leagues already with Danny Jansen, McGuire, and Alejandro Kirk. And then Gabriel Moreno, the prospect coming up, who's really turned some heads this year before getting injured. He might be the most interesting of them all. So with that in mind, you kind of can part with Adams here. Not that you want to be cavalier with your depth in any way, but this is a move that makes sense on both sides. For the Nationals, of course, to get a long-term catcher option at least, and for the Jays to help the team right now.
Yeah, Moreno's a guy we would have been talking about a lot over the last little bit. In the next couple of months, if he hadn't gotten hurt, there'd be a lot of clamoring for him to be called up to the big leagues, and he might have been earning it if he continued to be playing the way he was. Obviously, before he broke his wrist with Hand, he's a free agent this winter. So this is a move purely about 2021, purely about trying to improve the team's chances in the wild card race over the next 2 months. And in a way, Ben, that sort of signals something, right? Like that tells you that the Blue Jays front office believes in this roster and believes it's underperformed its run differential and believes it can take a run at the Yankees and the Mariners and the Athletics, some of those teams that they're looking up at right now. And this suggests to me that the Blue Jays aren't done. because there are still areas of need on this club, obviously. So does that mean that the Blue Jays go out and acquire another rental, maybe in the starting market, like a guy like Michael Pineda or John Gray? Do they look for somebody with a bit more control? Kyle Gibson, Merrill Kelly? Do they find a position player out there, even after Eduardo Escobar and Joey Gallo have come off the board? Like, we'll see what opportunities the Blue Jays end up pursuing, but this move tells me, and I think tells you, that we should expect the Blue Jays to continue to look to add over the next 24 hours.
Right. If there was any doubt, that what are the Blue Jays going to do? How are they going to approach this deadline, despite some frustrating losses and some struggles on the field? I think this erases it. Right. You're not going to go and acquire Brad Hand and then trade Marcus Semien the next day. It's this is what they're trying to do here. They're trying to win, which, as you and I have been talking about, I mean, that's what they told us from the last couple of months. So not a surprise, but this signals it even further that this is a team that they're looking to build around. And I do think that we're likely to see further additions. It's a team that could use them. And you look at a very competitive American League playoff pitcher. If you want to compete in that, if you want to emerge as one of those wildcard teams, more help would be a good thing for this Blue Jays team. So they should keep those phones charged and keep the calls going as the July 30th deadline approaches.
Yeah, I would expect plenty more movement across the league as Friday's 4 p.m. trade deadline approaches. For now, Blue Jays have helped the bullpen that's needed it for some time, and we'll see what they do next.